Today, we're exploring how automation is transforming workflows in everything from fast food to creative production, and why more people are abandoning big platforms for smaller, trust based online communities. We'll look at what happens when technology tries to streamline our work and ask how companies and platforms can foster authentic, meaningful connections. With tech humanist Kate O'Neill joining us, we'll dig into how to design automation that empowers people and what it takes to build connections that truly belong together and bring us all together in the age of AI. It's Wednesday, August 6th, 2025, and I'm Dave Sobel. Welcome to the Business of Tech Lounge. I welcome questions and comments throughout the show, so please submit them in the chat. If you have a question, we'll happily respond to it. Now, I want to thank Sales Builder, our Patreon sponsor, whose support makes this show possible. Focus on your IT sales workflow with the power of automation and visit them at salesbuilder.com. That's BUILDR.com. A reminder, I am watching that chat and will take questions in real time. Kate O'Neill is the founder and CEO of Kao Insights and a leading voice on how to make technology more aligned with human values. Often called the tech humanist, she's a strategist, author, and keynote speaker whose work spans over 2 decades at the intersection of technology, business, and humanity. Kate's career began in linguistics before she joined early-stage tech teams at Netflix, Toshiba, and Magazines.com, where she helped shape customer experience strategies that blended data with empathy. I so enjoyed our interview, I had to have her on the live show. Kate, welcome to the live show.
Oh, thanks for having me, Dave. It's great to be here.
Well, it was great fun talking to you for our interview, and I made note that I was like, Kate's one we've got to bring up some of the fun stories to. And as we were prepping this, I've been spending a lot of time thinking about workflows. I recently actually just put out in my own show where I put a behind the scenes video out for my Patreon supporters who now can see all the behind the scenes show of like how my workflow is integrating piece. But there's also a lot of discussion around this in the broader business world. And I love the classic example that comes to mind in fast food, right? Because Ray Kroc and the engineering and the idea of workflow automation that he put in place is kind of the quintessential business example. And McDonald's is a really strong example of someone who's been experimenting. If I cover a couple of the stories to give listeners the background, in June of 2024, they had been experimenting with AI-powered voice systems and removed it, right? And they'd actually worked with IBM to develop the technology, and they thought it was going to streamline everything. But in March of this year, McDonald's starts rolling out another wave of AI upgrades, this time focusing on edge computing and predictive analytics. And their idea is they're going to make operations smoother, reduce stress, and catch maintenance issues. But by the way, they're not the only ones. Wendy's is expanding AI voice ordering to as many as 600 drive-thrus by the end of this year. Taco Bell says they're scaling up in the same area. Now, I knew you'd have some thoughts, and I thought I would get a sense of like, hey, let's start there. They're already experimenting, failing, redeploying again. What are some of the traits here that makes automation succeed or fail?
Well, I think it's an interesting space, and certainly, like when you look at it as a metaphor for workflow across different industries, McDonald's and as sort of the standard bearer for fast food takes on special significance. Its ability to produce volumes of food in reliable ways, not necessarily at high quality of food, but at high predictability and high reliability. That becomes the sort of one end of the extreme in a sense. What people are looking for in terms of deliverability in product. And then when you look, of course, to a different extreme, if you think about food service that is meant to be more at the experiential level and more kind of hands-on, more that human-to-human kind of thing, then I think we sort of set ourselves up with one way to think about a framework or a model of where companies, where brands can find themselves along a spectrum, and how they can take something meaningful out of what McDonald's and Wendy's and Taco Bell and all the examples you talked about are doing. As for those companies themselves and what they're doing, it is interesting to witness their kind of experimentation and then pullback. Right? There's a real sense that this is a really delicate space to try to get this right and make sure that we're providing the kind of experience that supports the idea of trust and credibility of what the brand has come to mean for people.
And that's exactly why I like them. I like them as an example. I don't mind saying I'm a bit of a Michael Gerber, E-Myth kind of guy.
Yeah.
And McDonald's is an example he often uses in that. I also don't mind saying I worked there. I'm one of the, 1 in 5 Americans that has worked at a McDonald's. Like, that was my high school job. But I've always thought about how impressive the process of that is, the definition. You hit on it exactly right. Like, you can walk into a McDonald's anywhere on the planet and get the same experience. Putting aside whether or not you think that's a good thing or a bad thing in terms of the quality of food, what it is a consistent experience, right? You know that McDonald's hamburger will be the same no matter what it is. And in fact, like, the engineering behind their Coca-Cola is actually incredibly impressive, the level of consistency they go to make sure it's the same everywhere.
Yeah, and that's interesting. That's actually the work that I've done with McDonald's and Coca-Cola is on the partnership between those brands. So
and it's fascinating the amount of engineering that goes into making that exactly the same. And oftentimes for a lot of us, particularly when we come at it from like kind of the IT service delivery, there's a lot of elements that we want to be very consistent. And I like the methodology of thinking in very tangible terms of McDonald's. What I kind of want to get a sense of from you is like, I mean, we're already seeing like big fails, right? They've tried it, they pulled it back, they're trying another version of it. Like, what are you seeing in terms of the application of AI? And I'm intentionally being broad. Like, what are you seeing as trends of where it's working and where it isn't in terms of deploying it on workflows?
Yeah, I think what I saw a great webinar that that Gartner produced the other day on agentic AI, and I recommend this. They have it on demand for folks. I would even suggest the URL if I had it at hand. So perhaps I can provide it, and you can provide it in show notes. There's a webinar that they offer on agentic AI, and they offer this really nice model that sort of distinguishes between AI agents and agentic AI. And I think that's a really important construct that is very easy to overlook. They're talking about agentic AI and, kind of as one area under the umbrella of automation broadly, right? And then you think about agentic as the area in which, you can sort of think about some mechanism of automation, some decision process that's going beyond just I'm prompting, I'm getting a response. I'm prompting, I'm getting a response, right? At this point, I'm saying I'm prompting, I'm getting a response. It's moving into the next thing, right? It's making a decision on my behalf. It's taking it to the next place. And then within that, you can be thinking about like, how are these AI agents actually deployed? What is their logic? What kind of understanding do they have of our needs and of the boundaries, sort of the thresholds of their decision space? All of that, I think, is really critical to understand in order to take this McDonald's example or any of these examples and really start to apply it in business more broadly and think about how we might begin to make meaningful decisions about where automation, where workflow can be automated in ways that are actually going to be reliable, that are actually going to enhance the customer experience, that are actually going to keep that alignment between what the business is trying to accomplish and what the person is trying to accomplish. And I think that's what's so powerful about your choice of using McDonald's as this illustrative example, is that it really gets at the heart of this, right? That something that I come back to a lot in my work is we have to think about what the business is trying to do at scale. What is the purpose of the business? And when you really get clear on that, clear and succinct on that, and how you can really think about the scale that a business is trying to achieve. In McDonald's case, it's clearly about that kind of speed, reliability, reproducibility. That's kind of at the heart of what they're trying to do, and cost consciousness. On the other hand, what is the person coming to that brand or that company trying to achieve? And as the customer who comes to McDonald's is looking for that reliable experience, they're looking for that same hamburger that they have a familiar taste for. They're looking for that cost consciousness as well. Where you find that alignment between what the business is trying to do and what the customer is trying to do, that's where we need to be thinking about using data and technology to amplify the alignment, not just to amplify the business objectives or what the business's processes are about. That's where I think that McDonald's in these examples really is succeeding, where they tried something, they pulled it back, and they're trying again, because it really is about trying to put the automation at the point of alignment. And that, I think, is the really object lesson for folks who are running businesses, trying to think about automating workflows. It's not just about, what is something that's taking up a lot of time in your business and what can you automate? Sure, that's an important question to ask, from an efficiency standpoint. But in terms of making real impact, in terms of being able to really create these, 10x kinds of gains, you've got to be thinking about how you're bringing that automation and that efficiency to the point of alignment with what the customer experience is supposed to be expecting.
Well, you've totally brought me to where my next question is then. So if you're thinking about designing and automating these workflows, are there particular signals you look for to ensure that you're not losing the human experience in that pursuit of efficiency?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think there's proxy measures at all times, right? Like, I think for me, I think a lot about meaning as the sort of consummate human experience, but meaning is a notoriously difficult thing to measure, right? It's
Right.
hard to even talk about in a crisp way. There are way too many ways to think about meaning, but that's kind of the fun of it at some level. But I think what we need to do then is say, all right, understandably, meaning is something we would like to aim for, but we need proxies. We need to know that the brand is memorable, that we're creating experiences that somehow align with what somebody is trying to achieve. One of the measures that brands often use is net promoter score. That's something that if someone is willing to recommend you, very likely they had a good experience with you. So that's as close as we can get to a meaningfulness kind of measure in many cases. But I think what we're looking for is a way to model what the overall business looks like in data and dashboards and in kind of our canvassing of what the business model looks like. And we want to be thinking about meaningful measures at every point that we can, and bringing those meaningful measures into alignment as well, so that we can be thinking, what data are we collecting at this point that would tell us something about whether we're losing people, whether we're, bringing people back in, whether we're in alignment with what we're trying to achieve. That opportunity, I think, is something that we have all throughout the way we model business, and it's something that too often we rely on sort of the default measures of like, well, we know we're supposed to use, page views, or we're supposed to use return visits or that sort of thing. Return visits might actually be a really useful metric, but only if we understand it within the context of our purpose, our objectives, and how the customer is looking to us for that alignment with what they're trying to achieve. So it really is about drawing this kind of comprehensive view of the business model. I lay it out on a canvas. I'm sure there are many canvases that people can use. I have one that's available for download on my website, and it's helpful, I think, to be able to kind of sketch out how the workings of the business, how they kind of connect together, and how you're using data and automation and technology throughout different parts of that process to understand that process better, to make better decisions about those processes, and to make sure that you're as aligned with customer experience as you possibly can be.
Gotcha. For those watching, if you want to throw a question in the chat, we will definitely take them on, but I can keep going. Now, Kate, what was interesting when you brought up the meaning in that context is you didn't name who the meaning was for. And I kind of want to know, I wanted you to say a little bit more, because I could have interpreted everything you've said that meaning for the customer, but I could also interpret everything you said as meaning for the employee. I suspect that's a little intentional, but so I'm going to ask you, say a little bit more about how you're thinking about meaning, because, by the way, it can mean something different for both sets of players in that.
Yeah, you're so right, Dave. It's why you're so brilliant, and this show works so well.
I pay attention is really what it comes down to.
Yeah, well, that's key. I think of, as I said, I think meaning is the sort of core human experience, and anywhere you have humans involved in the process, I think it makes sense to think about the meaning of their experience. And I think also we need to understand that business is a human construct, right? Even though business stands apart from, from humanity in a way that's kind of abstracted from human experience, it is still a human construct, just as technology is a human construct. And so I think it's really important to carry forward the human values and human attributes into the way we think about optimizing business, optimizing technology. When we think about the interrelationship of these things, it becomes really important to know how humanity is represented in those constructs. So inside of business, the way we think about humanity and about human experience that is meaningful is through purpose, and that is that it's talked about a lot. People are used to in business programs and business books. We hear a lot about purpose. I think, though, many cases it gets talked about in very esoteric ways, as if it's this kind of fluffy, feel good concept. And for me, it's less that and more about this very succinct strategic understanding of what the business exists to do and is trying to do at scale. And the clearer we are about that, the clearer we are about that purpose, is purpose is the shape that meaning takes in business. The clearer we are about that purpose, the more employees across the organization, team members, can contribute to that sense of purpose, can all make decisions at the level of their autonomy that align with that purpose, can all, do things like be able to make judgment calls and bring emotional intelligence to bear in the decisions that they take, the customer service calls that they're fielding, the moments that they have where, this is what good management looks like, is, to kind of push that understanding of purpose down and throughout the organization so that people can rise to the opportunity to make judgment calls and bring their own understanding of that context to life with with the meaningful experiences that purpose represents. And yes, on the customer side, it looks much more like these kind of rich, meaningful, memorable kind of experiences. But those actually interrelate so much more than I think we often give them credit for.
Well, I think you're right, and the reason I'm spending so much time here is because I actually think this is where all the value is, right? Like they like making this stuff all work, and I think
Yes.
my audience of technologists is the people to do it. But what I kind of want to get a sense of is as I was listening to you talk, I'm thinking a lot about the fact that, okay, there's going to be times where there's tension between the two sides, right? That there's going to be a tension between employee meaning and what they're focused on versus customer meaning.
Mm-hmm.
And then my immediate next thought was, well, maybe I'm thinking about it wrong. Maybe the trick is just re-engineering it to always find the alignment. Okay, you spend more time thinking about it than I do. Is this more of a tension balancing exercise, or is this a constant realignment exercise? Like, which framework is the better one to think about it in?
It's a really good question, and I think at some level it's a bit philosophical. But I think one of my favorite examples of this, and I don't mean philosophical in a bad way, because I happen to really like philosophy. But one of my favorite examples of this that I think is a very clear example is if you think about Disney theme parks. Disney theme parks, you could distill their purpose statement, and they often do, to 3 words: create magical experiences. And when you think about that, and you think about how crystal clear that is, and I see in the comments Rick Vanover asking, was purpose different from a mission statement? And Rick, it's a really, really good question, because this is something that often feels like a point of tension, right? Like we've got mission statements, we've got vision statements, we've got all these kinds of things in organizations, but often those are like paragraph long quasi language that nobody can quote by heart. People can't necessarily make these very heart guided or intuition guided decisions in the moment about them. But create magical experiences is something that is very crystal clear, that if you're working as a clerk in a store on Main Street in a Disney theme park, and you are left with a judgment call, you have to refund a product or something along those lines. What is the most magical experience that you can create in that moment? That's what you're left with the decision to empower. And then if you're someone who is answering phone calls in a call center and someone's having a difficult time booking their trip or something like that, what is the way that you can most empower and create magical experiences? I think it's really, really clear across the various roles, the various hierarchy in an organization when you strip it down to something that's that articulated. The other thing, though, that's really powerful about this is that when you have that much vividness to the sense of purpose, you also can deploy technology solutions. Like you just do it is another gold standard. You can deploy technology solutions that are aligned with this purpose in such a way that they actually enhance and sort of amplify all of the purpose affecting activities that people across the organization are doing. So think about the My Magic Band wearables at Disney theme parks, right? That's a multi-billion dollar investment, and yet so worth it, because at every point it does everything that it's supposed to do. It's bringing all this payment information, all of these kind of preferences, all this identity information to enable people to move through the park in seemingly magical ways that also happens to contribute to increased spend and increased retention in ways that amplify what the business is trying to do at the same time that it's amplifying what the customer is trying to do, or the guest in their case, right? They want to use that terminology. But also think about how it enhances the experience for the employee, that if I feel empowered and I have the autonomy to make good decisions within the context of creating magical experiences, I will feel very fulfilled at the end of my day if I got to make a guest experience feel that much more magical. So I think, it's such a great kind of clear, vivid example for people to take back to their own organizations and think, what is the kind of equivalent that we could articulate in 3 to 5 words, no more than that, that really feels like such a good distillation of what it is we're trying to do and do at scale, that would actually make people's lives a lot clearer and work a lot clearer, and would make it easier to lay in technology, machine operations, automated workflow that would actually help us migrate toward that mission and that purpose that we're talking about in that meaningful way.
It's funny you bring these up, because I was in Nashville, Tennessee over the weekend and got a chance to do the Jack Daniels tour. And I took a picture of the sign that was all over the place because I'm reading it off my phone. Every day we make it, we'll make it the best we can. Was that, and it's like that. Okay, I totally get it. Like, I absolutely totally get it. Get their mission, their drive, like their statement. And I think oftentimes we perhaps corporate speak a little too much. Some of these mission vision statements, when it really just is so simple. Sometimes I'm just saying, like, what are we trying to do? It should be that simple and expressible. And I think that's the bit that we have to layer in. How much does employee feedback matter in all of this? Because oftentimes this exercise is, corporate executives go off in a room and they come down from on high with this. Like, how much should this much be more employee driven?
I think it depends on the organization. I think, we would love to sort of veer toward a place where we would listen a lot to employees, but I think that's going to depend on the maturity of the organization, how well hired in, how much the culture is developed and has steeped into the organization. In reality, I am a big fan of listening to employees and to getting a sense of what innate organic culture has developed in an organization. But it's possible that an organization has not had that sense of culture, and there's kind of random hires. People aren't necessarily there, fulfilling some great sense of purpose. That's a failure on the part of the leadership from the beginning, and leadership needs to understand that. But at that point, it may make more sense to sort of say from the top, say from a founder's origin story sort of ideal, this is what we really would love to accomplish. This is what we've been in business to try to achieve. And we need to sort of wipe the slate clean. We need to, figure out who is on this bus with us, who is part of this process, who amongst the people we have here is really committed to doing this. And if they're not, that's the sort of freeing up the future, making sure we've got the right people really committed and bought in to bringing that vision to life. Most organizations hopefully are not misaligned to a great degree, but in most organizations, I would hope that it could start with a very kind of town hall-ish kind of feeling of, what are we all driven by? What do we feel like we're most passionate when we do? I had an opportunity at one company. I was working at magazines.com years ago, and I was entrusted with doing a brand renovation and customer experience renovation project. And I was running the research part of it from within the company. And I had two consultants working from outside the company doing their own research and kind of third-party evaluations, some field work, and so on. And what was so fascinating to me was every time we got together to compare notes, how aligned our insights were. And that just made me feel like we were so on track, that, the feedback from within the company, that the feel of what people were committed to and what people understood to be the mission, and what the consultants outside were getting from the industry at large and from sort of consumer expectations and so on, that those things actually married up. That's the best possible scenario. But not everyone is going to look like that. So I think it's really going to be a change management project in many organizations, and one that should be committed to that way.
Gotcha. And I want to be careful with our time. And we had a whole second topic that we've dwelled so much on the first and gone so deep with some of the listener questions. And I actually want to only just pull one element of that, because we were thinking a little bit about online communities. And I've been thinking a lot also about how we extend that customer trust communication to online communities. And I just wanted to throw out a couple of stats for people that, there's research showing that digital platforms are losing trust, with 42% of consumers finding even traditional search less useful. 60% of respondents expressed a negative view of social media. How are you thinking about extending that as we think about workflows? And a lot of that is now we're talking about is digital workflows. How are you thinking about making sure brands and consumers are experiencing the kind of interaction that you want, particularly in a world where now we're starting to inject so much more AI, where consumers are already starting to push back on that? How are you thinking about that dynamic?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think there's a lot of complexity around the issue of trust these days. Obviously, we understand that AI is changing the nature of trust, and we've got the deep fakes and a lot of kind of misinformation and hallucinations that generative AI is want to offer us. At the same time, we are in a not just in the U.S. but worldwide. I think there's an increasing amount of political division and the sense of partisanship and mistrust across political lines. We have just so many factors that are making trust a much more complicated topic. In addition to that, of course, many people are, as you cited, feeling distrust with search engines and social media and all of the online tools. I think that the opportunity with brands and with companies, with leadership, is to really think about where shared values exist along those purpose lines, along the lines of what it is the company is actually bringing to the marketplace or to the consumer base that they share. I mean, if you think about an organization like Patagonia, for example, there's a real sense of shared values in nature and in the appreciation of the outdoors. And you don't necessarily need to go into political space beyond that. You don't necessarily need to create a bunch of digital tools beyond that. The digital tools that you do create, the kind of technology that you invest in, can all be about reinforcing the various nuances of the shared values that your organization and your customer base have in common. And that, I think, is going to be true for many, many kinds of organizations. Like, there are going to be the kinds of shared spaces that we can create that don't necessarily mean that we have to take on the world. We don't have to sort of boil the ocean to understand how to create trustworthy universes for our customers or for our employees. I think it comes down to really understanding what we're entrusted with, and remember that These last couple of years, Edelman's Trust Barometer has shown that it is corporations that hold the highest trust amongst the types of institutions that they survey public trust for. So out of media, NGOs, government, and corporations, the public trust is less mistrustful, let's put it that way, of corporations than of those other types of entities. And it's an interesting challenge for corporate leaders, but an opportunity, of course, as well. And one that in this context, one of the things I keep writing editorials about over the last few months is that in a moment where we're faced with lots and lots of deregulation, where the U.S. administration is deregulating around climate, around AI, around all kinds of things, that doesn't mean that we're in a every man for himself sort of situation. It means that in many cases, businesses have to be the ones who take on governance. Now, so business leaders become the ones who have to say, well, we're going to operate from a place of this level of responsibility, this kind of self-governance, and understand that these kinds of things change every 4 years, every couple of years, and we need to be prepared to think much more sustainably, much more long term about the kinds of responsibility, the kinds of sustainability we're building into our businesses. So those need to come from a place of authentic alignment with what we're actually in business to do. And that's where I think the opportunity to foster trust with our communities really comes into play, is if our communities see us operating from this place of true alignment with what we're all in agreement that we are there to do, it will make the greatest sense to our communities.
Well, I'm going to leave it at that hopeful thought, because that is a really nice way to think about it, and actually a challenge that particularly smaller companies that are working with other small companies have a lot of opportunity to put their arms around. Kate, if people are interested in reaching out, I know you've got a book and you've got some downloadable resources. What's the best way for them to get in touch?
The best way and the most comprehensive way is at my website, kaoinsights.com. And there is plenty of information there about my consulting, my speaking, my latest book, What Matters Next, and plenty of opportunity there to reach out to me as well. And I would really welcome for folks to reach out, share their thoughts and the questions that they had, the insights that they were too shy to share in the comments. But feel free to share them on social media or with me on email.
Awesome. Kate, this has been great fun. Thank you so much for joining me on the live show.
Thank you, Dave.
Now, I want to preview an interview that just dropped. Dan Wensley, the new CEO of GTIA, shared his vision for expanding the organization's membership and enhancing the value it provides to IT service providers. He discussed the importance of community engagement, resource utilization, and a commitment to giving back, all while navigating the evolving landscape of tech as it stands right now. This preview is me asking about the size of GTIA, where it stands now, and where it needs to go. Here's a preview of that interview.
Guys, let's talk about the first number, and I want to latch onto that because if I compare that against, say, Microsoft's ecosystem, which, by the way, should include everybody in the technology industry, based on they're preach numbers of 300,000. We can go to lots of other communities. Like, if we're using that metric as a number, give me a little bit of a sense of like what you're kind of thinking growth looks like over the next, say, 12 months.
Well, the TAM, the total addressable market opportunity, is certainly on the right side of the bow tie. The IT service provider themselves, Dave. Mm-hmm. The majority of our 2,400 member companies are ITSPs, but there's so many more. We know what that TAM number is on a global basis. So one of the areas of focus for us is how can we ensure we're communicating the value of membership in GTIA to the ITSP community and bring more in as members.
Okay, let's ask the question. What is the value of why someone should join the organization, particularly an IT service provider?
So today, a couple of areas. One is the resources. There is an incredible amount of resources done by subject matter experts inside GTIA, inside our membership, whether it's AI, whether it's IoT, whether it's managed services. Some of the advisory councils you and I shared and joined together years ago, they're putting a phenomenal amount of content and research driven by the member out to the community, but not enough ITSPs and MSPs are taking advantage of that. So we need to do a better job not creating content, but actually making sure that content is promoted, marketed, and shown and taken advantage of by more people.
My Patreon supporters are getting access to my GTIA ChannelCon interviews now if you want to get access to them early. It's a benefit of supporting the show. Visit patreon.com/MSP Radio to sign up and get access to all those interviews. They'll be dropping on the YouTube channel and podcast feed. New ones coming out this weekend. That one with Dan is already available. Now, I want to thank Sales Builder, our Patreon sponsor, whose support makes this show possible. Focus on your IT sales workflow with the power of automation and visit them at salesbuilder.com. That's BUILDR.com. And vendors, you too can get your name mentioned on the live show. It's a simple monthly subscription. Visit patreon.com/MSP Radio for more. And listeners, you can support the show. Like, share, and follow on your favorite platforms. It is by far the number one thing you can do to help support the show. But if you want to get access to that content early, you can support directly on Patreon with our Give What You Want model. You set what you think the content is worth, and you get access to videos early. If you have a question and are listening to the recording, either put it in the comments below or send it in at question@mspradio.com, and we'll answer it on the next live show. Thanks for joining me for the Business of Tech Lounge, and I will see you next time.